Hello, it is Lynx here once again, and today I am going to be doing Late Night Nightmare and Analysis by an orphan account on AO3. Just before we get started with this, I would like to say that I have been recording for far too long. So, just for reference, I sat down to record at 10:43 a.m. It is now 12:29 p.m. I have been here for a couple hours recording. Holy wow, that's actually a while. So, without further ado, let's get into this. The fic is not rated, and there is one archive warning, graphic depictions of violence. We just love our violence here. So, without further ado, let's get into this. Summary: when Aizawa has a nightmare about Yue's problem child, he heads to the student dorms, only to bump into Izuku Midoriya. Aizawa winced in pain as his head was lifted up once again in the monstrous grasp. The thing known as Nomu didn't care if it caused discomfort and agony. It couldn't think for itself. It didn't have feelings. Aizawa struggled in the grasp of the Nomu's hand, blood pouring out of his head injuries, making it hard to stay awake. But he couldn't pass out. Not yet. If he passed out, his students would be in even more danger. Aizawa kept his eye on the villain that called himself Shigaraki, but while staring at the boy, Aizawa saw three of his students hiding nearby, watching them with fearful eyes. Aizawa felt his blood run cold when he realized how close to certain death they were, and he wanted to scream at them to run. But he won't. If he yelled, Mineta, Tsuyu, and Izuku, the villain would most certainly go after them with whatever this monster on top of him is. Aizawa was so focused on his students, he missed what the villain with malicious eyes and flaky skin said. It only caught up to Aizawa when he saw the villain run towards the three students that were doing a terrible job at hiding. No, get away from them, Aizawa yelled out, trying to activate his quirk. But his quirk wouldn't work on the villain. No, leave them alone, Aizawa called out one more time as he saw Shigaraki placing his dangerous hand on Midoriya's face. Izuku's face morphed from a confused shock into a petrified child. His scream of absolute agony as his face began to flake away was burned into Aizawa's mind as he watched helplessly. Each piece of Izuku turned to dust slowly, and Aizawa couldn't do anything but watch as the freckled teen tried to escape the pain that Shigaraki was inflicting on him. The screaming continued as blood began to pool from the wound and into Izuku's mouth, making him choke on his own blood. Izuku tried to grab at the villain's hand, but he was too weak from the pain and the loss of blood to do any real damage. Sue and Mineta could only watch in horror as their classmate started to become nothing but a pile of dust and blood on the floor. Aizawa yelled as he woke up from the terrifying nightmare and grasped onto his shirt tightly. The images of Izuku's bloody form still burned into his mind while he screamed, and no matter how many times he shook his head or told himself that the kid was safe, he still couldn't get rid of the terrifying image. It had been quite a while since he had last had a nightmare about the USJ, but he guessed thanks to the raid on the League of Villains and finally beating them, the nightmares had come back worse than ever before. Aizawa took an uneasy breath as he looked at his clock and frowned at the time. The numbers 3:27 a.m. flashed mockingly at him, and Aizawa had to hold back a groan as he laid back down and took a couple deep breaths, calming his nerves as best as he could. Aizawa closed his eyes for a second, but the moment his eyes closed, images of his students dying flashed across his mind. I guess sleep is not an option tonight, Aizawa grumbled to himself. Putting on a pair of slippers and grabbing his capture scarf, Aizawa walked out of his room and headed to his student's dorm, hoping that being in the building where he knew all of his students were safe, his nerves would relax a little bit. Aizawa walked through the front door. He was expecting to see nothing but darkness and no students, but the light of the kitchen shimmered into the common room lightly. Who the hell is awake at this hour? Aizawa thought to himself as he walked towards the kitchen cautiously. Aizawa prepared himself to see a villain or a student that woke up to get a glass of water, but when he walked in, he was kind of surprised to see the problem child at a table with 3 different notebooks out, a bunch of loose papers, headphones that was blaring loud music, and a laptop. Aizawa felt himself relax to see Izuku at this hour. It meant that the boy was actually safe and not attracting villains like the villain magnet he is, and it meant that Aizawa didn't have to see the bloody imagery of his problem child, but Aizawa was worrying about why Izuku was awake at this hour. Izuku was so drawn into what he was doing, he didn't notice the teacher walk up to him and clear his throat loudly to get his attention. Izuku continued to keep writing, unaware of anything, until Aizawa decided to place his hand on the boy's shoulder. Izuku let out a giant yelp, and the headphones that were placed on his head fell off and onto the floor with a giant thump. The music was loud enough for Aizawa to figure out what the boy was listening to. Gotta Be a Reason by Alec Benjamin, and then he nodded in approval, but he made sure that Izuku didn't see it. Aizawa took a moment to look at Izuku. Izuku's hair was messier than usual, and his eyes and freckles seemed to glow slightly in the dim room. His face wasn't turning into dust, and there was no screaming. "What are you doing up at 3:43 a.m.? Aizawa asked, making sure his voice was monotone and tired. Aizawa can't let his students know that he had a soft spot. He had a reputation to keep up. Izuku seemed nervous as he picked at his hands, and a small blush of embarrassment made itself known on Izuku's face. I couldn't sleep, Mr. Aizawa. Sorry. I can go back to my room if you want me to. Sorry." Izuku quickly went to pick up his supplies, but Aizawa stopped Izuku before he could fully pack up and leave. It may seem selfish, but Aizawa wanted Izuku to stay a bit longer. He needed to make sure that the boy wasn't going to turn to dust in a second, and he needed to make sure that Izuku was actually getting sleep and not staying up till 4 a.m. every day. "You don't need to be sorry, problem child. I just want to know why you are awake at such an unholy hour. It may be the weekend, but you still need a somewhat proper sleep schedule." Izuku looked down, and tears seemed to threaten to spill from the boy's eyes. He must have had some sort of nightmare, Aizawa thought to himself with a sigh. Taking one more glance at Izuku, Aizawa moved towards a kettle and began to boil some water for tea. "You don't have to talk to me about it, problem child, but you need to tell someone about what's bugging you. You have All Might, Hound Dog, Yamada, Namori, and even Nezu, who would all lend a hand to you if you ask for help. You don't need to fight whatever is going on in your head alone." The tears in Izuku's eyes began to build up a bit more, and Aizawa cursed internally, worried that he may have said something wrong to the traumatized boy. He wasn't the best when it came to kids, especially emotional kids like Izuku Midoriya. I'm fine. It's nothing I haven't handled before," Izuku mumbled, and Aizawa felt his heart ache. "Midoriya, just because you've handled it before doesn't mean you can't ask for help. Hell, you shouldn't even have to be dealing with this shit yet. You're only a child, and the stuff you have seen is traumatizing, so don't say you're fine when you truly are not." Aizawa pointed to his student, hoping Izuku would listen to his words. I was too late to save you and Sue at the USJ attack," Izuku whispered quietly while looking at the floor like it was the most interesting thing ever. The whisper was so quiet, Aizawa almost missed it. Aizawa wanted to laugh bitterly at how the events turned out, because not only was Aizawa awake because he had a nightmare about Izuku being disintegrated, but Izuku was awake because he had a nightmare where he couldn't save him and Sue at USJ. "Look at me, Midoriya." Aizawa crouched in front of Izuku, and Izuku hesitantly looked up at his sensei. Aizawa grabbed Izuku's hand and placed it where his heart is and took a deep breath. "I'm still alive, problem child. Sue is still alive. Uraraka is still alive. Todoroki is still alive. Bakugo is alive. All of Class 1A is alive. And we don't plan on dying anytime soon. The USJ is in the past. We all survived and we are all healthy. League of Villains is behind bars, and they won't be getting out anytime soon." Aizawa spoke softly, and it surprised him how soft his voice went. Izuku had a few tears roll down his cheek as he nodded his head, still feeling his teacher's heartbeat. Aizawa decided that Izuku was too mentally tired to deal with talking about nightmares, so he got 2 mugs of tea and gave one to the younger boy, who looked surprised at first but relaxed when he grabbed the mug from the teacher. "What are you writing about, problem child?" Aizawa asked, hoping to brighten the boy up a bit. He thought he made the right move when Izuku's eyes widened and had stars in them. I'm reading about a new hero that just had their major debut yesterday. Her name is Alice the Cheshire Cat Hero," Izuku whispered as he pulled up a news article on the young hero and grabbed one of his notebooks before he flipped through the pages and let Aizawa have a peek at what he was writing. It's not the best, but I enjoy analyzing heroes and villains," Izuku mumbled, nervous about what Aizawa's reaction was going to be. Aizawa stared at the paper in front of him, surprised at how detailed it was. If Izuku Midoriya ever became a villain, they were all fucked.
This is pretty good, problem child. Your analysis skills could be quite useful in the field, but my biggest concern is how these aren't in some sort of code. If someone were to find these notebooks of yours, they could easily defeat a hero and exploit all their weaknesses.
Aizawa calmly said, and Izuku's face morphed from excited to slightly scared. I never thought my notes were that accurate. How do I write in code? Izuku looked up at Aizawa with big pleading eyes that said he didn't want to hurt anyone.
Nezu and I can help teach you, but I will need to show these to Nezu.
Izuku nodded his head and looked back down to his notebook and then to the hero on the screen. He wanted to write more about her, but he was afraid that the notebook would get into the wrong hands.
If you would like, I can help you write her notes in code.
Aizawa knew they should be going to bed, but he decided that sleep is for the weak. Izuku obviously didn't want to sleep and wanted to keep his mind off of whatever nightmare he had, and Aizawa wanted to keep his mind off Izuku's dead body. Izuku instantly brightened up, and that's how they spent the rest of their morning. Both of the boys slowly forgetting about their nightmares and enjoying each other's company as they wrote about the new hero. When Class 1A walked downstairs, they stayed absolutely quiet as they peeked into the kitchen with a sly grin on their faces and phone cameras out. Aizawa and Izuku were both sleeping at the table in the kitchen with piles of papers and a nearly dead laptop surrounding them. Both of the boys had a small content smile on their faces as they felt safe with each other and felt relaxed, knowing the other is safe. Alright, so that was the fic. It was so cute and I enjoyed it. If you couldn't know, you could probably hear the cuts. But the beginning, I sounded really tired because I had been recording for 2 hours. Then there was a bit that was really quiet because I was like whispering because it was night in my living room. And then there's this last little bit that I did. The sun is setting, but it's still daytime as I'm recording this. And I'm sorry that there was no video yesterday. As of recording, there's no video today. Because this is coming out tomorrow. It's Tuesday. No, it's Monday recording this. This will be out Tuesday. So sorry for no video on Monday. It's confusing, but whatever. So anyways, remember to eat, sleep, drink your water, and take your meds. And when you sleep, go to bed at a reasonable time. Remember, kids, be do and crime gay.